On a beautiful Sunday morning 2 weeks ago, leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints dedicated a new temple in Provo, Utah. But this is a place that has been sacred ground for Latter-day Saints for more than a century and a half, where Mormon pioneers gathered together, worshiped, and listened to the voices of the prophets. After the heartbreak felt by so many when the Provo Tabernacle was lost in a fire, this historic edifice has now been restored into a modern-day temple with a feel of the pioneer craftsmanship that is a testament to the faith of those early Latter-day Saints who built it.
To watch that happen, see it in ruins, watch it be rebuilt, and then to see it now as this pristine, beautiful gem that just looks like it's descended from heaven. I love the look of it. I love the fact that it's back, and I love the purpose which it will now serve.
Join us now as we look at the history, significance, and transformation of the beloved Provo Tabernacle into a house of the Lord, in Rising from the Ashes, a new temple in Provo. A beloved house of worship, a community landmark, and now a temple. The Provo Tabernacle has always been the heart of Provo, where people attended stake conferences, graduations, concerts, and even interfaith services. And those special experiences and memories in the Tabernacle created a special bond with many Latter-day Saints.
That tabernacle is special to anybody who's ever lived in Utah County. My life has been inextricably linked with that building for almost all of my Provo years.
From his time as a student at BYU to president of the university and later as an apostle, few people may have been more heartbroken the day the tabernacle caught fire than Elder Jeffrey R. Holland.
Was so dear to us and has meant so much in that community that I was stunned. I really couldn't quite believe it, and then realized it was happening and it was burning. It was a very emotional moment for me.
Some have suggested the tabernacle fire and then the transformation into a temple can be a parallel of how people can change their lives as they turn to God. What lessons do you believe people can learn as they look at the tragedy of the fire and now see the beauty of the temple?
It was a mistake, it was an accident that the thing burned down in the first place, and we all make mistakes. There are accidents in our lives. And if there weren't any way back from that, if there wasn't any way to have hope after that, we'd all be in despair. But like the building, we take into account human error and whatever it was that caused all of that, and we go to work on it and remedy it, and we stay with this and persevere and work hard, and God blesses us.
But the Provo Tabernacle as we know it was not the first house of worship on this block. The pioneers first built a smaller tabernacle that stood right here. The first of what would become Provo's 2 tabernacles was built in 1861. For more than 20 years, it would be where Latter-day Saints would gather for Sunday services and community events, eventually becoming known as the Old Meeting House.
We believe this is the original window frame that was above the front door of the tabernacle.
In 2012, BYU archaeology professor Richard Talbot led an effort to unearth the foundation of the Old Meeting House in the lawn just north of the Provo Tabernacle.
We can learn to appreciate our pioneer ancestors, the skill that they had in building this, and all of the descriptions that you read in their journals say that it was built with love, that they absolutely were excited about building this, about having a meeting house where they could all come.
The excavation was gentle, mostly by hand, with shovels and screens, and people were anxious to look through the fence to see what was found.
This is a piece of a slate blackboard, and you guys recognize what these are? Old school pencils.
The 2.5-month project of digging, sifting, and discovering helped to preserve and protect some of Provo's earliest history for generations to come. Many of the items were displayed during the temple open house.
What we have tells a story that otherwise would not be told. It's a glimpse into the past. It's really a window into the past that tells us of life in the 1850s and the 1860s that allows you to hold on to those pieces of the past more than just reading a story. You actually get to hold on to the pieces, and that's what archaeology does, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime unique opportunity.
But as time went on, Provo outgrew its first house of worship, and in 1883, work began on a new tabernacle in Provo. Built with much sacrifice and detailed craftsmanship, Latter-day Saints would begin using it even though it wasn't finished, including during the 1886 General Conference of the Church. Elder Ken F. Richards, who oversees the church's temples, found an interesting entry in his great-great-grandfather's journal, Apostle Franklin D. Richards, about the new Provo Tabernacle.
The first time he came here was in 1885, just shortly after they'd put the roof on. And he mentioned in his journal that they had temporary seating, there were no doors, no windows, but it was the only place in town that they could gather. So they used it throughout the construction period until it was finally dedicated in 1898.
For the next 112 years, the Provo Tabernacle would be a gathering place for Latter-day Saints. Once a president of the United States spoke in the tabernacle, William Howard Taft visited in 1909. In recent decades, Latter-day Saints in the Provo area would attend their state conferences in the tabernacle, largely in part because it could seat 3,000 people. Always a memorable experience not only for the messages they heard, but the spirit they felt, especially the connection to their pioneer ancestors whose faith and sacrifice surrounded them within the tabernacle where they worshiped. But a building that had tied generations together in Provo and was a treasure of church architecture from the 19th century would suddenly be lost in just one night.
It's just so sad this historic site is gone. The pioneers worked so hard to build it.
The tragedy of the fire that would be the first step in a temple rising from the ashes when we continue. For 127 years, the Tabernacle served Provo as a house of worship and a community gathering place, providing a link between generations. And sadly, on a cold and icy December morning, people in Provo woke up to see their beloved tabernacle was on fire.
Fire the tabernacle right now. Copy, we'll get the fire department on out.
When Provo firefighters got the call at 2:40 a.m., they could see the flames in the windows of the tabernacle from their station just 2 blocks away. Firefighters' worst fears would be realized when they arrived on the scene. The intense flames left firefighters no choice but to set up a defensive battle on the outside to protect the safety of the firefighters, a decision that may have saved lives when the roof came crashing down. As smoke filled the air throughout Provo, word quickly spread, and people came to see for themselves, staring in shock and disbelief at the destruction of a community treasure.
It's a sad day. There's a great deal of emotion that most people will feel, as I do.
I know some ancestors who helped build it, so it's pretty special to me, and I'm kind of sad that it's gone.
People offered silent prayers and shed tears in the street. The loss was very personal.
It's devastating. It's like an old friend, you know, that's no more.
While the scorched bricks of the tabernacle shell were still standing, inside it was a complete loss. The priceless pioneer woodwork, pipe organ, and history of the iconic edifice all destroyed.
Clearly there will be sentiment on all sides to try to make this building what it once was. I just hope that's even a possibility.
As firefighters dug through the rubble the day after the fire, a painting of Christ was salvaged from the inside, a small miracle in the midst of all of the destruction that gave people who loved the tabernacle reason to have hope.
It's too bad, but I'm sure something good will come out of it. It'll be rebuilt or something different.
But answers about the tabernacle's future would have to wait. Fire investigators would dig through the rubble for weeks before determining the cause of the fire was accidental, blamed on a 300-watt ceiling light mistakenly placed on a wooden box in the attic, along with a faulty alarm system. Steel supports were installed to shore up the exterior walls, but otherwise the site sat quietly for 9 months until the Saturday morning session of October General Conference.
Late last year, the Provo Tabernacle in Utah County was seriously damaged by a terrible fire. This wonderful building, much beloved by generations of Latter-day Saints, was left with only the exterior walls standing. After careful study, we've decided to rebuild it with full preservation and restoration of the exterior to become the second temple of the church in the city of Provo.
A feeling of hope once again returned to the Tabernacle property that suddenly felt more sacred than it ever had before.
I was stunned. I was thrilled. I was overcome. I was emotional.
7 months later, the Tabernacle site was filled with people in their Sunday best as ground was officially broken for the Provo City Center Temple.
I didn't know exactly what to expect for a groundbreaking, and we had 6,000 people come to that groundbreaking. They were all over that block and across the street and in the neighborhood, and all that says to me is how special that building was and is, and how much people feel about it and for it, and why they wanted to come even to something as simple and ordinary as a groundbreaking. It was a terrific morning for me.
But how would the fire-ravaged building be restored to its glory as a temple? It was a process that would be fascinating and at times nerve-wracking to watch.
When they first talked about doing this, you're set back and say, they want to do what?
A look at what it took to build a modern temple inside of a historic brick shell. When rising from the ashes, a new temple in Provo continues. In the days after the fire, many feared the tabernacle was lost forever. But thanks to modern construction technology, it was given a second chance as a temple. And it would take months of historic research, detailed architectural plans, and an engineering feat to make it a reality. It was a scene people had to see for themselves in person. The exterior shell of the Provo Tabernacle seemed to be floating in the air, the first of many challenges for the general contractor in transforming the tabernacle into a new temple.
As we got the teams together, the design teams and the engineers, and we started to say, you know what, this can be done, we can do this.
Following the wishes of the First Presidency to have the ordinance rooms within the original walls of the tabernacle, architects had to take a much different approach in their design. It required a basement along with extensive space underground for administrative rooms in the temple. Crews began by first installing the steel supports 90 feet into the ground and then carefully excavating underneath the empty shell, with the bricks now reinforced on the interior.
Every time I was in Provo, I'd drive by to see how it was going, and the architectural work and the engineering work and the construction work on that was just phenomenal. I'm not an engineering kind of guy, so it was all a mystery to me how they could do that.
The tabernacle would sit on these stilts for months until a new foundation was poured and the original building was finally back on solid ground. While the fascinating process of supporting the brick shell captured the attention of onlookers, an equally important task was going on behind the scenes. Within the walls of the fire-ravaged tabernacle, crews sifted through the rubble, discovering a few items that would be instrumental in the design of the new temple. The designers would also look to the original architect of the tabernacle, William H. Folsom, who designed the Manti Temple.
We tried to think, what would he have done? And we studied the Manti Temple, went inside, and studied some of the details and the trim there.
The result gives the new temple a pioneer-era feel, reflecting the style and time of the original building. For Folsom's great-great-grandson, Scott Folsom, it has been emotional to watch the restoration of the tabernacle.
I thought it was the end. I thought that was the end of one of his buildings. So the fact that the church has done all the effort and expense, I know it means a lot to a lot of people that over the years have attended their meetings here and events, but it's meant a lot to our family as well.
A major milestone in the construction was reached in March of 2014. Thousands gathered around the temple block as the statue of the angel Moroni was placed atop the center steeple that was part of the original design of the tabernacle. But there was still a lot of work to be done, especially the small details that collectively would add to the beauty of the temple.
It's a true labor of love when you work on a temple. We don't do it to glorify ourselves, it's to glorify God. And it's rewarding for sure.
Jerry Lynn was able to work with his father in creating new art windows for the temple, both inside and out. David Lynn had restored the tabernacle glass windows in the 1990s and says he found spiritual strength as he watched his sons install the stunning skylight in the celestial room.
When I look up at that skylight, I'm looking into the sky and looking up, feeling the Spirit of God. The window itself has great joy, and the joy of watching those boys take over and do that was pretty special.
By the end of November, the temple was complete, a career highlight for the hundreds of people who were involved in building it.
The feelings that you have as you work on one of these historical remodels, my mind goes back to the hardships that those pioneers had, the labor and the hours that they spent, and not having the tools and the materials that we have, the availability of the materials, and what they were able to accomplish. And now to see it transition from a tabernacle into a temple, I can't help but think those that have passed on, those that are on the other side, are very pleased with what they started out here and what this has become.
1,343 days after the groundbreaking, church leaders prepared to open the doors of the new temple to the public.
I think it brings together both our past and our future in a remarkable way, and so I think people want to see what's been done to be able to capture all of that in this beautiful temple.
To me, it is historically elegant. It represents the history, the pioneer heritage that is here, and it represents a tribute and a dedication to the Lord for the opportunity to have what He has provided for us, sacred ordinances on this earth.
After years of anticipation, the public open house gave everyone the opportunity to see the inside of the new temple. From the grand staircase to the hallways with Victorian-era decor, the beautiful ceiling rooms, and the serene celestial room, people left inspired. This 19th century art glass of Christ with his flock was acquired from a Presbyterian chapel in New York. Recently restored, it welcomes those as they come to the temple.
We've done everything we can to maintain the heritage and the legacy of the pioneer spirit, the artisans and the workmen that created the original building, but at the same time look forward to the future with a beautiful new temple and the opportunity to participate in ordinances of the temple in the house of the Lord.
Interest in the public tours was constant. More than 800,000 people walked through the temple during the 7-week open house. 2 weeks after the public tours ended, the long-awaited day of dedication had finally arrived.
It was an amazing experience to be in there and to know that now it's a temple of the Lord.
It's definitely nice to kind of hear all the stories about the tabernacle and to know that we'll have another temple here in Provo.
We want them to feel the Spirit and to feel a great appreciation for the temple and this incredible gift that we've been given, another temple in Provo.
The next day, a feeling of renewal filled the air as the morning light fell onto the new temple.
For the wilderness has blossomed, blossomed like a rose.
Flowers and trees in bloom adorning the completed temple, now ready for dedication.
Thank you to the many who have gathered here on University Avenue to witness this symbolic completion of the Provo City Center Temple.
The mortar applied to the cornerstone was the end of a process that not only preserved the tabernacle, but more importantly finished yet another temple, the 150th in the church.
I have no doubt that the pioneers who came here and settled in this valley would be thrilled to know that this old tabernacle has been transformed into a holy house of the Lord.
It's amazing. It's beautiful. It truly is a phoenix rising out of the ashes.
I'll always remember the strong spirit that I felt right after the dedicatory prayer when we were singing Spirit of God, and knowing that this is the temple that's dedicated to the Lord.
And for those who say they cried when the tabernacle caught fire, On this day of dedication,
tears of happiness.
They shed tears again as they stand in the shadow of a new temple.
I drove by the morning that the fire broke out and stopped by the side of the road and cried. I love this building.
No longer the Provo Tabernacle, this historic building now has a higher purpose and will stand for generations to come as a link between the past, the present, and the future.
After the fire, a lot of people, I think, were worried that the building would come down, that their cultural story would be lost, that the impact of this building on the residents of Provo would be forgotten by the church and by the larger community. And so the fact that this building is still here is really a great symbol that the story of historic Provo is still standing, that you can still come and touch this brick and walk the grounds of a building that has been here since the 1880s.
But more importantly, the Provo City Center Temple is a symbolic reminder that as challenges and even tragedies come in life, having faith in heaven's help will always bring hope.
Not only as good as it was, it's better than it was. I think there's a tremendous story in that for human life, for personal life, with the gospel, with the atonement, with the blessings of God, with the help of good people and our own faith. We can improve things. We can turn life around. We can take a tragedy and make a blessing out of it. I think that little project symbolizes that in a wonderful way.